Revolutionary. Genius. Confident.
Roald Amundsen was one of the world's greatest explorers in all time.
Roald Amundsen was a Norwegian explorer who discovered the South Pole for the credit of Norway. He's a very smart explorer. His voyage took quite a lot of planning because he knew he had competition. Robert Falcon Scott was also planning a voyage to the South Pole. It was the beginning of a wicked race.
Who will win?
The South Pole is the southernmost part of the Earth. Most people know that it's cold, but they don't know that the temperatures can get down to negative 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The average winter temperature is usually negative 34 degrees Fahrenheit. This made it extremely difficult for Amundsen and Scott to reach the South Pole. Can you describe a bit more of the weather and the conditions of the South Pole?
Sure. So I was there during the summer season, so it was around negative 30 or negative 40. And the weird thing is that the sun is up all the time. It just kind of rotates around in the sky. So that's weird. It's definitely weird for sleeping and keeping regular hours.
Roald Engelbrekt Gravning Amundsen was born on July 16, 1872, near Oslo, Norway. He was the fourth and final son of Jens Engelbrekt Amundsen and Hanna Henrike Gustava Sakist. He had three older brothers named Antonio, Gustav, and Leon. Roald's father was a sea captain and successful business owner. Jens Amundsen was a good but stern father. While he was not at sea, he spent time with his sons and taught them practical common sense and fighting skills. Roald's mother, Gustava, was really focused on the kids' education and wanted a bright future for her children.
Roald Amundsen and his siblings learned many techniques during their childhood, such as skiing, skating, wood carving, forestry, and boating skills. Soon after his father's death in 1886, Amundsen's three brothers left out to sea, which left only Amundsen and his mother. His mother wanted Amundsen to pursue a career in medicine. He only did this to please her, but soon started to enjoy British history. His favorite story was the tragic fate of John Franklin and his quest to locate the Northwest Passage. Roald Amundsen quoted, "His description of the return from one of his expeditions thrilled me as nothing I have ever read before." He told how for 3 weeks he and his little band had battled with ice storms, with no food to eat except for a few bones found at a deserted island camp and their own boot leather. Strangely enough, the thing in Sir John's narrative that appealed to me most strongly was the sufferings he and his men endured. A strange ambition burned within me to endure those same sufferings. Secretly, I decided to be an Arctic explorer.
Even though people all around the world go to the South Pole very easily, back when Roald Amundsen did it, there wasn't as much technology as there is today. Since they didn't have the tools in order to make huts that are warm enough along the way, they had to use their boat as their living space. They even had to calculate exactly where to put their ship, because the ice could get too cold and start to chip away, or it could break off and the ship could sail out to sea.
In 1907, he started planning a trip to the North Pole. Amundsen's trip was very complex. He calculated and put a lot of effort into planning this trip. He did not raise too many funds for his voyage, so he used the boat Fram, which was used in an earlier voyage by Fridtjof Nansen. In August 1910, Amundsen left his home in Norway to the North Pole. His crew consisted of 8 men, 4 dog sleds, and 52 dogs. Soon the news broke out that Robert E. Peary, an American explorer, had reached the North Pole by dog sled. There was no point of going any more since there would be no prize. Amundsen had to ditch his voyage of going to north and started heading south. The voyage to the South Pole had to be kept a secret. Only 4 of his crew members knew about his switch trip. This time, it wasn't just Amundsen trying to reach the South Pole. He had some competition. That same year, Robert Falcon Scott, an English Royal Navy officer, had decided to make a trip to the South Pole as a scientific voyage. Scott was a very organized man who had his voyage planned for months. Amundsen wrote a message to the Canarian Islands to Scott saying that he was going south also. Amundsen had planned a different route to the South Pole with Scott to meet him there. Scott was going through a route already taken by Shackleton, and Amundsen was taking a larger risk and going to the Transantarctic Mountains.
The crew had first first encountered the South Pole on January 1911 in the Bay of Wales, 788 miles from the center of the South Pole. That was where their first base was established. Roald planned to leave the base in September to get a head start. On their journey, many things were getting out of hand, such as people getting split up and coming in late. Everyone was always tired and exhausted, so Amundsen made a new plan. To take his own separate group, which consisted of him and 4 other men, Olav of Vlassen Behad, Hilmar Hansen, Sverre H. Hassel, and Oscar Wisting. Amundsen's group split up with the others on October 19, 1911. A month later, on November 15th, Amundsen's group had reached the large ice-covered mountains and started heading their way up.
With 5 men and 18 dogs left, it was a struggle. Wind and snow blowing in their faces at 35 miles an hour. Thick fog, and they were 2 days behind schedule. On December 8th, only 95 miles away from their destination, they had reached Shackleton's farthest point only 3 years earlier. They were the first to venture beyond the point into the unknown. The existence of the poles had been known, but there was the unwelcoming landscape that presented a barrier.
Just very cold, very dry, and the other thing I'd want to say about the environment is like I said, we were drilling down like a mile into the ice, so your altitude is like really high, so the air is very thin there.
Do you know how far down the ice went?
Total, I'd have to look that number up, but it's more than a mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We might have been at like 9,000 feet. That number sticks out in my head, but I could be totally wrong.
But then, on December 14th, 1911, they had reached the South Pole. Roald Amundsen said to his crew, "Victory awaits him who has everything in order. Defeat is certain for him who has neglected to take necessary precautions in time." They had to put up a pair of skis with the Norwegian flag sailing high. He named the area after the King of Norway, King Haakon VII. They put up a tent and inside with a note to Scott to give a message to the king if he does not survive the way home. He also left separate letters from his other crew members, a sextant, and a pair of mittens in a small bag. The Arctic summer was coming to an end, so he had limited time to come home. They were delayed from harsh snow blizzards and very low temperatures. It was almost impossible to go through the storm, and his crew was also suffering from starvation. He died sometime around March. The only proof we have was from his last diary entry on March 29, 1912.
39 days after the discovery of the South Pole on December 14, 1911, Roald Amundsen came back with 11 dogs and 5 men, hale and hearty. This was the first team to successfully reach the South Pole. This was quite the accomplishment at the time. Roald Amundsen quoted, "We must always remember with gratitude and admiration the first sailors who steered their vessels through storms and mists, and increased our knowledge of the lands of the ice in the south."
Roald Amundsen was one of the world's best explorers known to man. With his excellent use of knowledge and planning, he created a journey who could beat any explorer. Not only did Roald Amundsen explore the South Pole, he inspired and opened people's eyes to not be afraid and discover the unknown. Roald Amundsen is historically significant because he conducted the first successful expedition to the South Pole. His hard work and perseverance paid off on December 14, 1911. He had won the long and exhausting race against Robert Falcon Scott to the South Pole.